Okay, should be visible. Okay, so yeah, I got asked to say a few words here. This is not a new conversation. This is something that has been ongoing for more than a year, probably. And this conversation started mainly when the first single round for proof systems came out. There was a big discussion, I remember, from these teams that were saying we can reduce the challenge period because if you do one step instead of 60, you need less time to play the challenge, right? And this was because of a misconception that the 7 days are needed because of the many steps. This is not true, and and that's kind of where it started. Now, over time, we kind of understand more what's the trade-off. But yeah, so let me get started. So again, the reason we have the 7 days is because we want to protect the rollups from strong censorship attacks. And strong censorship attacks means you have a majority of validators that are malicious, and they will not attest to blocks that contain for proof transactions, right? And if the majority of validators is malicious, they can censor indefinitely. And we say, actually, this is not indefinite because the Ethereum protocol will coordinate a fork to get rid of these censoring validators. So after the fork, censorship resistance will be restored. But we need the fork, right? And it was not at the time like super clear what was like the exact timeline. I wrote this article that was trying to come up with a tentative timeline, and this timeline kind of estimates that we can fork in 5 days. We can coordinate, implement, and activate a fork, either a soft fork or a hard fork, in 5 days. Which, if you think about it, it's already very tight. So again, there is this assumption that if you have a challenge period of 7 days, Ethereum protocol will make sure that censorship resistance will be restored. And most of the proof systems that have been designed, or like that have been studied, are based around these assumptions, right? So this is Bold from Offchain Labs. If you read through the paper, they say we have this Cmax value that is the bound of the censorship budget that the attacker has. We assume that the attacker can censor, can delay transactions, but not more than this Cmax value. And we say that this Cmax value is around or the order of a week. Here, the paper says that this is a conservative estimate. I kind of disagree with that. I don't think 7 days is conservative. I think it's pretty tight. But in any case, like the safety of the system or like the security of the system is based around the fact that censorship will not be indefinite, and eventually it will be resolved. This is from Bold. This is from Dave, which is another proof system from Cartesi. They also have a censorship budget. They call it TC. And again, it assumes that this is 1 week. And again, if this doesn't hold, the system is broken. So we kind of assume that. And something to keep in mind is that, on Ethereum, if you have funds on Ethereum and there is a majority of validators that is malicious, these validators, the attacker, cannot steal funds from you. It can double spend, it can censor, but like if you have ETH in your account and doing nothing, the attacker will not be able to steal these funds from you. And for this reason, we should expect the same from the rollups, right? So if you say rollups get the same security as Ethereum, ideally at stage 2 or whatever, we should expect the same property from the rollups as well, right? But what we want to argue here is kind of, okay, stage 1 is supposed to be something in the middle between stage 0 and stage 2, so maybe we can relax a little bit. the security assumption, also because we have a security council, we already have, this strong assumption that the security council will not drag the chain. So maybe, this is not that bad for stage one, right? So let's say that we agree that it is okay to have this assumption that 51% attacks will not happen. And also let's assume that the TVS, the combined TVS of all the optimistic rollups will remain well below the Ethereum's economic security, because otherwise it becomes profitable to do this attack. And this is like systematic risk that Ethereum has as well. This is kind of scenario similar to Lido that needs to self-limit, right? I hope optimistic rollups will not need to do this, but also, it kind of gets to the same conversations. So, okay, let's assume all of this, that we are okay with this risk. And if we do this, we now have to study what is a safe lower bound for a challenge period to protect ourselves from soft censorship attacks. So builder-driven, not attestation-driven, right? And first, we need to kind of understand how the builder or building block market works. And I kind of tried to look into the top consensus clients, and I was not super familiar with this, but just for everyone to know, the way that validators choose a block when they're connected to builder is they build the block locally based on the transactions that are in the mempool. They get the bid from the builder, and if the money that they get from the local block is more than what they get from the builder, they will build using the local block, right? And the local block has the censorship resistant property because you get a transaction in the mempool, you order by tip, whatever. So the builder needs to pay you to convince you not to use your local block, right? So it's not that if you're connected to a builder, it's not that you just accept whatever block without thinking. You compare the block that the builder gives you to the, you compare the builder bid with the tips that you get from the local block. So this is good because now there is a cost to the attacker to censor transactions, right? To prevent you from including a transaction that is paying enough from the mempool. Otherwise, if this was not true, the attack would almost be free, right? But it is not. And all these nodes, all these softwares have some params with good default values to do this. If it's 100%, it means that if the local block has more value, you would use that. If it's 90, for example, and a lot of projects use 90, it means that the builder block needs to be more than 10% more profitable than the local block. And luckily, we have Offchain Labs that writes good paper. So earlier this year, Offchain Labs has published an analysis around the cryptoeconomic security of challenge protocols exactly under this scenario, when there is an attacker that can do soft censorship attacks, right? So if you go through the abstract, they say major optimistic rollups today set this period at roughly 1 week, talking about the challenge period, mainly to guard against strong censorship that undermines Ethereum's own cryptoeconomic security. However, other forms of censorship are possible, and the implication on optimistic rollup security is not well understood. And this is what this paper tries to do. And it's very good. And this paper, I will go briefly to what the paper says, but it tries to model different type of scenarios. One of the scenario, which is the simplest one, which is the one that I will go through, is there is a challenger that wants to send a transaction to challenge a malicious state root. This transaction will pay a tip. And now the attacker needs to pay more so that the validator accepts a block that censors, right? So the game is the validator will accept the transaction from whoever bids the most, right? So if you have, let's say, a transaction from the challenger in the mempool with 1 ETH tip, the attacker needs to bid at least 1 ETH at every block to prevent these transactions from getting in. So, and also, they also model different type of games where a certain percentage of actors is just building blocks locally. And then they also model the scenario where Fossil is implemented. But I will not go through them. Let's go through the simple scenario where all the validators are delegating to builders, and they will accept either the local block or the builder block based on who pays the most. And since the fraud-proof game is interactive, the challenger needs more than one transaction to settle a challenge, a fraud-proof, right? So if the defender, which is the challenger, let's say, has a certain budget, it will need to divide this budget based on the number of transactions that it needs to submit. So we have T here, which is the total number of rounds that you can also see as the total number of blocks that there is during a period. So if we have 1 day as a challenge period, T is the total number of blocks in 1 day. N is the number of, let's say, steps that the protocol needs to make for one challenge to resolve. And then there is Alice's budget, which Alice is the attacker because it starts with an A, and Daria is the defender because it starts with a D. And in the end, they come up with a formula that says, okay, if the attacker has this budget, the defender needs to have this other budget. And so the defender budget is calculated as a function of the attacker's budget. And the attacker's budget can be fixed to, for example, the protocol TVS, right? Because if, let's say, Arbitrum has $10 billion in the bridge, the attacker can spend up to $10 billion to steal money from the bridge. So now you need to calculate, okay, to protect $10 billion of value, how much money the defender needs to have. And this is, very classic, crypto economic analysis, where an attacker can exhaust the resources of a defender. And if you go to chapter 6, section 6, they do the math, and the result is that the defender, to protect $10 billion, needs at least $12 million, which is a lot, but it's not that bad. And I'm going to also explain why it's not that bad. But this assumes that the number of rounds that the defender needs to win, or like the number of steps that a challenge takes, is 60, and this is based on bold. Like the depth of the game is 60, so the defender will need 60 steps. I think it's a little bit more complicated than this, to be honest. And while this analysis is very good, there are two forms of crypto economic attacks that can happen on challenge protocols, and this is something that I discussed at DevCon last year in terms of Sybil attacks that you can do on optimistic rollups. So, like, if you have an attacker that proposes invalid state roots, it might not be enough to play one challenge, right? Because an attacker can just post 1,000 invalid state roots. So you might need to play 1,000 challenges. And if you need to play more challenges, it might be that the number of steps is more than the number of steps that it takes to resolve one challenge. There is a cost usually associated to opening new challenges. You might need a new stake. And different for proof systems, I also posted a very long article explaining all the trade-offs between, for example, bold proof system and optimism, OPFP and Cartesi proof system. If you want to read it, it presents like the full trade-off in terms of large bond size, small bond size, full concurrency, partial concurrency, whatever. If you want to read it or like listen to the talk, it's called Fraud Proof's War. But basically, there is, what I'm trying to say is that there is already an economic attack that is possible on optimistic rollups. And these economic attacks are measured based on what is the advantage that the defender has on the attacker, right? So we said before, with the paper, we see that even if the attacker is willing to spend up to $10 billion, the defender just needs $12 million. So the advantage is pretty good in this case. But the problem is this advantage is lower when we consider this other form of cryptoeconomic attacks that has nothing to do with censorship. Like these attacks exist even in the absence of censorship. And again, I don't have time to go into the details of how this works. But for example, bold for the advantage, the defender advantage for bold is around 6.5 x. So this means that if the attacker is willing to spend $10 billion, the defender needs to have at least 1.5 billion already. So this is like, again, ignoring censorship. For optimism, this ratio is 0.91. Is much, much worse than Arbitrum. And in practice, it means the defender needs to have more money than the attacker to protect the protocol. And Arbitrum is better, but again, it's not like amazing, right? It's not the same as ZK rollup, if you want to use that as a comparison. But usually people say, okay, $1.5 billion is a lot, but this is fine because in the end, the winner will get all the money back plus a reward from the funds that will be slashed from the attacker. So it's a lot of money, but probably we can find people that can pool funds together and we'll make a profit eventually, right? So the problem is, while is this true that it might be easier in this case to pool the funds and reach these very high amounts of money, in the censorship case, you lose the money. Like you will not get this money back. You need to spend this money in tips and you will not get it back. So I argue that it is more difficult to spend the same amount of money in stakes versus in tips to be able to pull the funds. And the paper also fixes the number of rounds that it uses to calculate this 12 million that I discussed before. But this number is not fixed because, as I said before, the attacker can spend his budget to create more challenges and increase the number of rounds that the defender needs to win, right? And if you do the math, the relation is not even linear; it's faster than linear. But like 60 rounds, which is one challenge, the defender needs $12 million to protect 10 billion. If you have 10 challenges, let's say it's 600 rounds, and this is again a simplification, but like just to give some numbers, the defender needs $120 million, and for 6,000 rounds, it needs 1 billion and something dollars, which is similar to the other type of economic attack. But again, in this case, the defender will not get this money back, so it's arguably worse, right? So what I'm trying to say is that we need to understand how these economic attacks that can happen around censorship, how they play together with the economic attack that are already possible because of other reasons, because of civil attacks on censorship. And we need to understand, like based on the attacker's budget, whether for the attacker it makes more sense to, let's say, spend this budget on stake or spend this budget on censorship, or like how the two things play together, because again, it could be that one stake induces more rounds and more rounds induce more spending to the defender. And also the attacker, one thing that it can do is force the defender to spend money in a way that this money will not get back to the defender, right? So instead of forcing the defender to spend his money stake, it will force the defender to spend his money in tips. So what I'm trying to say is that this is complicated, and I don't think it's very clear that a protocol would be safe with a challenge period of 1 day. Like it's not clear how much money we need to reserve for purpose to protect ourselves from cryptoeconomic attacks. The good news is that if we had Fossil, Fossil would get rid of most of these concerns. Also in the paper, they do the analysis where Fossil is presented, and they say the money that the defender needs is under 1 million, because like censorship resistant guarantees are much better. The attacker needs to spend way more money to censor than the version that we just discussed. So I think it's a good idea to push Fossil if this is the what we want to do. And also, like pragmatically speaking, I really believe that today most of the stage 1 projects, if there is indeed an attack, like a serious attack, will not use the challenge protocol to protect themselves. I bet that if something like this happens, the Security Council will be used to just get rid of the malicious state root in one way or the other. And if this is the only like realistic safeguard to these cryptoeconomic attacks, I don't think we can consider these projects as having fully functional proof systems, right? And on Auto-Bits, right now, having a fully functional proof system is not even a stage 1 requirement; it's a stage 0 requirement. So I think we need to be careful around these things. Okay, so apart from all this discussion, we also need to get realistic or like discuss what are the benefits to go from 7 days to 1 day, or like 2 days, or whether there is significant difference between 1 and 2, in some way or the other. And we didn't get a lot of comments, to be honest, on this. And I hope some other people can chime in. We got one comment in the research post from Hart, which is founder of Across the Internet Protocol, and he says 1 day is of course much better than 7 days, but also he says where we want to get to is 1 hour bridge, or like a few hours bridge, right? And a challenge period in the order of hours is of course unrealistic, very unrealistic. And there is also Greg representing like solvers, says that of course 1 day is better than 7 days, but at the end here it says, my gut instinct said that if we go from 7 to 1 day, we might see the LP fee go down by a marginal amount, say 20-30%, simply because the cost of locking up is still relatively high and the margins are already so low. And at the top also, I missed that, it says, reduce the L2 exit window can impact the solver and market maker community, but only if it's done in a significantly more dramatic way. I'd argue down to a few hours. So like to me, again, it's not super clear that the advantage from going to 7 days to 1 day is that big to cause all these potential issues in crypto economic attacks that force us to use security councils all the time if these things happen. And I would love to get like more opinion of this if people have some. And I'm not really sure that like end users, not even solvers, will start using the canonical bridge compared to, let's say, Across or like other internet protocols. So that's all I had. And I couldn't read the chat, so I will do it now. Thanks.
Greg?
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for that. That was really, really well done. I just want to speak. Sorry, this is Greg. I wrote the post, or wrote the reply. So I think there's like one key thing to understand here, which is like, especially when it comes to market makers, LPs, NAMMs, arbitrageurs, anybody really in that category. It doesn't, the name of the game for us and these folks, in order to use the native bridge, is like how many rebalances I can get in a day and at what cost. And that's why, like, unless you dramatically drop it to, an hour ideally, that'd be great. Uh, I'd rather just like take the risk for $12 to send it across Binance. Binance is like maybe $1 to move in and out, right, to mainnet. And I can, for like $12 in a day, get like anywhere from 8 to 12 rebalances in. And so for most people, it's probably, there's higher incentive to wanting to just like get it done faster. And we operate over our books are relatively centralized as is. So for us, it doesn't matter. And so that's why I don't think like us as the end user is going to solve a whole lot of problems. What it will solve is it'll bring the cost of capital for teams like Across to run their LP system. And that's the one that settles all the like fast exits for solvers to like move across. And that's great, right? That will have a dramatic reduction in the amount of capital that's needed held. Instead of 7 days worth of capital, it goes down to 1 day of capital. And it might change the rate slightly, but I don't think you'll see a huge dramatic shift in the end user, because you'll probably just watch the total liquidity in those pools just ride the utility curve, right? The same way like an Aave curve, the pricing of an Aave curve, a lot of these LPs will drop out, the fees will go to zero, and then it'll probably rebalance back to roughly where it was before. Maybe a slight discount, just because some people will stay in it for longer. So it has huge benefit, and I'm all for dropping the time, because I think it makes overall capital efficiency much smoother where you have to use the native bridge and the true, and the protocols that actually follow like, a true decentralized, by using the native bridges. But it's not going to dramatically improve end user experience, in my opinion. And it won't dramatically improve the market maker solver landscape, as like, we just still won't use it. Because it's, one rebalance versus upwards of like 12 to 20, just depending on how many you can do in a day. Because the user volume is not going to change, right? It's just the amount of capital needed to process these transactions faster is what dramatically changes. Yeah, I think that's like the main gist of what I'm saying, and I think Hart is also relatively in line with that. I don't want to speak on behalf, but based on his comments, kind of similar.
I wanted to jump in and just maybe outline a few points that, Greg, I think we're mostly on the same page, but I might quibble on a few points there. I think the way I think about these L2, and by the way, I'm Matt from Across. I don't think Hart can make it today. He might be on the call later, but the way I think about it is like, when you have bidirectional flow, if you have like equal flow in both directions, you just net everything off and it's fine. But if you do have directional flow off of these L2s, off of a particular L2, somebody's going to be left holding the bag. Like, somebody has to be waiting in the 7-day bridge with those funds, whether it's Binance, whether it's Across's LPs, somebody's got to be holding the bag there. And ultimately, somebody's going to have to pay that cost of locking that capital up in the bridge. And so where I'd push back a little bit on what you said, Greg, and I'll leave a more detailed comment in the thread, like in the ETH research post, but that cost is going to be paid by users. Like, users, to get off that chain, if there is directional flow off the chain, they are going to have to pay that rate for somebody basically lending them the money to get their funds off quickly. And so ultimately that cost is going to be borne by users. And like, the Across LP fees, I think, would go down substantially, because the rate that a user pays on a particular transfer is different from the rate that an LP gets. If you think about it this way, like an LP holding their capital for 7 days, having their capital in the system for 7 days, they could support 7 transfers over that 7-day bridge with a week, holding that dollar there for a week. Whereas in the current, with a 7-day bridge, they can only support 1 transfer. So you can think about it as a user, basically an LP can support more transfers with the same dollar. So they basically get paid more, while the users get paid, have to pay in less. So this does make like systems like Across much more efficient, and basically means that users pay in terms of the capital cost they're paying on these transfers, they should see a roughly 7x lower cost. Once again, this is for directional flow off of the L2s. So I do think that reducing from 7 days to 1 day would be a pretty big deal for user costs, for ease of moving capital off these chains, especially when you see directional flow. And at Across, we've sort of been in the L2 space for a while. There are, these things go through ebbs and flows, and we have seen massive directional flows off these chains during periods of time. And our LPs just get super utilized because, there's a bunch of people trying to move ETH off a particular chain because there's some farming opportunity somewhere. And this puts a lot of stress on the system and drives up costs for users because we have to sit here waiting for 7 days to get the funds back. So yeah, I think it would be a big deal. I think 1 hour would be much, much, much better. But yeah, I think any reduction here would be helpful to users and impactful.
I wanted to bring back the focus to security for a bit, following up on what Danu mentioned. So yeah, this discussion was triggered about a year ago, largely because of a non-interactive protocol being promoted and the claims it had made about finality. There is a lot of nuance here. One thing to note is that, by the way, I'm Rami. I'm from Boundless. I worked on that non-interactive protocol called Kailua. And some of the nuance there was that even if you have a challenge going on, you can still have very low delays because you can resolve that challenge as fast as you can compute a proof. So you don't have to go and play out a full non-interactive dispute game and spend the whole 3.5 or 7 days playing that. If a dispute happens, you can just shut that down immediately. The other nuanced detail to also bear in mind is that a non-interactive protocol like Kailua means that these economic attacks or whale attacks that are possible today in interactive protocols are not possible in a non-interactive one. Mainly because no matter how many disputes an adversary opens, or how many state proposals an adversary submits, the honest defender only needs to submit one honest proposal every dispute period. And that automatically prevents any of the adversary's proposals from being acceptable. The proofs then come in later at any pace to eliminate these bogus proposals. So that ties into the analyses that Dono had mentioned. So even if we consider a proposer builder model where we have to bear in mind the censorship budget. So we're not talking about 50% attacks, we're just talking about bribery, essentially. So if we have this one honest challenger transaction, basically have its fees set to be the entire collateral requirement for participation in the protocol, you get a completely different cost of attack. So for example, let's say this fee is 1 ETH, just 1 ETH to put up as collateral to participate in the protocol. And you want to bribe all the proposers, let's say they are 100%. They are dominating 100% of the blocks, and you want to bribe them for a full day, then you basically need 72,000 ETH, right, to spend to do that bribery attack. And that's assuming, PBS is 100%, because if PBS is just, 1% off, that transaction should be landing within a day, right? And these are details that are often overlooked. And I think when we want to analyze this and come to a reasonable conclusion, we have to differentiate between interactive and non-interactive protocols, even if, the interactive one in consideration has a pretty good defender to attacker ratio.
Paul?
Hi, I'm Paul from OP Labs, and I wanted to follow up on what Rami said, because I think right now is a good time to talk about this when optimistic ZK is also available for many people to use. And I think the 7-day L1 hard fork assumption is quite optimistic, and a lot of, no pun intended, and a lot of this hangs off of that original assumption. And with dispute games, interactive dispute games, it doesn't matter that much because you still have this 3-hour transaction inclusion times your number of transactions for the whole dispute game, and it sort of works out the same. But if you have optimistic ZK, then essentially you need one transaction to challenge it, and I think that's kind of relevant now.
Thanks, Paul. Toris?
Hi. I want to mention a couple of things, different things. I think there's a bunch of confusion here. First of all, it's completely irrelevant for the window, for the withdrawal window. It's completely irrelevant if you're interactive or not. You only care about censoring the first transaction. The interacting protocol can just automatically go on chain into like 10 months challenge protocol. I don't care. So you only care about that very first transaction that triggers the challenge. So that's it. For any system, we only care about censorship for one single transaction. Now, I would phrase the whole discussion here not in terms of a trade-off of, yes, we all know this lower security versus this is what we're going to gain on capital efficiency or whatever it is. It's not such a trade-off. I think we should actually define, when you're designing any kind of system, what are the boundaries that we're trying to work with? What are the security assumptions that we want to guarantee our users? And given this set of constraints, this is what the challenge protocol should be, or this is what rollup should be. We should really get aligned into what are the security guarantees that we want to provide our users. We might agree or might disagree on rollups should be resistant to a 51% attack on Ethereum, like Ethereum users are, or might not agree on this. But the whole point is that we should set the line of what are the security assumptions that we're willing to guarantee. And once we have that and we agree on that, we can design a system and we can talk about like deadlines for windows or not. Regarding the challenge, the censoring for 1 day or 7 days or whatever it is, it's a single transaction. There are changes on L1 that we can propose regardless of fossil even. Fossil certainly makes the economic guarantees much better than the current guarantees. Because, I mean, this is already in that paper that was mentioned by Luca, like this multiple proposers make the economic attack much less profitable. But it doesn't account for the 51% attackers. Fossil just, you don't even need to include the transactions. If you have a 51 attacker, they can just vote a block as valid, even though it's censoring. What I wanted to mention is that strong censorship and even that fossil censorship can be detected on chain. So the challenge protocol can on chain count with very strong statistical inference how many blocks were reorged by the attacker, can count how many inclusion lists, bit lists were not included or not satisfied. And these kind of things that can be set on chain, we can just immediately delay on chain the protocol. So oracles for these kind of things exist if we decide to implement those things in L1. And then we move the problem to just purely an economic problem that we can actually analyze as it was analyzed. And we can just measure what is the censorship that we're guaranteeing our users or not. So I think we should like set those parameters first and then talk about capital efficiency, which I think is just secondary to these kind of problems.
If I can jump in, I disagree, because I think that the argument isn't, we know what we want, the security we want L2s to have. We want L2s to be stage 2. The argument is that because of the requirements of these security guarantees, which is the 7-day withdrawal window, users do not actually get the security of the L2s because they're using trusted bridges and synthetic assets. So the argument is that we know what the security we want is. The argument is that by enforcing this security, the users are actually not getting it. And so that, I think, is the argument. So I kind of disagree there.
I also disagree with the idea that it doesn't matter how many moves you have to make in order to defend against an attack. Depending on how you model your adversary, you can assume that if they have managed to bribe or control a certain percentage of the chain, then they can effectively delay each and every one of your moves by a certain amount of time. So this means if you have to make 60 moves and an adversary can delay each one of your transactions on average by an hour, then your lower bound is 60 hours. So this does play a major role in how much time should be allotted for a dispute.
Carl?
Yeah, I think that it is going to be very hard for us to align on a detailed security model for L2s because that is very challenging. However, I think we can all align on, or at least I feel very aligned on a few things, which is one, that we want L2s to be very secure, and two, that we all want to get to stage 2, and 3, that we want to provide a good experience for users. And I think that we should really focus on the conversation about, okay, we know for a fact that lowering the withdrawal times from 7 days to 1 day will massively increase the amount of chains that are able to get efficient price discovery and efficient bridging from their chain to other chains, more chains in the across network. And I think that would be a really good thing for the Ethereum ecosystem because we want L2s to be massively successful. And so that I think is the starting point. And then it is a question, I do think it is a question and a nuanced question of, okay, do we think that that is still in line with our security goals? And the point that Ellie, I think, really made very well there, which is, well, if we don't make these changes, will people use these bridges anyway? So is this kind of a moot point is the security question a moot point? At least we're giving users better security than the alternative. So I'm not going to say that we're going to all be aligned on the security nuances on this call, but I don't know. I felt like that. Just like directionality is useful to keep in mind as we have these discussions.
Thanks, Carl. Let's go to Harry next.
Man, this is a conversation that I feel like has been going for I don't even know how many years now, like 5 years now. I was just thinking about Carl, you probably remember Kelvin had a great blog post in I don't remember, 2021, 2022, which was just what the hell is this 7-day period thing? Which was put in place before the merge, when prospectively there was this idea that we could slash in if censorship occurred, even though that was completely impossible before proof of stake. So the history of it is kind of wild. I have a lot of mixed thoughts on this. The argument of essentially kind of I'm one argument I'd like to make is stage 2 is great in theory and everybody is trying to move for stage 2, but also I worry about getting too caught up in sacrificing stage 1 where most chains are today in the interest of stage 2, and that I think that the argument that basically today the actual security assumptions people are getting are not from the native bridge because they're using other bridges is a great one. And that definitely seems worth thinking about and looking at and trying to balance cohesively. I guess what I'm saying is I think I would argue we should be optimizing for the practical security of stage 1 rollups today, versus and not worrying as much about stage 2, which is a goal and will be a goal no matter what. But also we don't know exactly when mainstream high adoption rollups are going to actually be at a point where the trade-offs for stage 2 are acceptable. And I hope it's soon, but I wouldn't want to bet too much that it's going to be very soon. Um, the other, let's see, a couple other small thoughts. One, I think just to clarify the conversation that happened a little bit in the chat from what Poda said, for optimistic for for multi-round interactive proofs, what you can do is basically say hey, if there's no challenge at all, it'll be confirmed in a day. If there is a challenge, that challenge window will be extended out for longer. You still have the LP risk of a withdrawal could take 7 days. In the happy case, in the average case, it would be 1 day. It's kind of a middle ground. I think the question of how much average expected time to complete the withdrawal versus worst case time is something that would be very worth evaluating when it comes to this. And then let's see, the last one being just, well, the last two, sorry, too quick. One, like, at least for our model, like, there's no time for censorship per transaction. Like, if that model is wrong, then that's worth discussing. Like, the model we use is basically there's a global censorship budget that can be applied across a number of transactions, but that if you spend it all up front or something, then the rest of transactions will be able to go through quickly. If there's disagreement about that, that definitely seems worth fleshing out. Again, not settled on this call. Like people have said, there's only so much time. The last thing is, like, I would love for us, and I feel like there's, like, yes, agreeing on this call and like an overall security model is probably infeasible, but also, like, it's a scary, messy thing messing with the challenge period. There's a reason why it hasn't made any momentum before now, and I'm really excited that there's a serious conversation happening about it now because it's really needed. But also, like, I don't want to move too fast. I mean, I think we need to, like, be very careful of the optics here externally in terms of, like, if the optics are just like, hey, we're just like YOLO changing it because we felt like it, then we are going to get attacked to hell by everybody outside the Ethereum ecosystem. And so, like, making sure we have like a fundamentals based, like, strong analysis of it feels like pretty damn important. All right. Sorry for taking up so much time, but a lot of thoughts.
Yeah, I also just wanted to mention that the idea that we would be able, or I don't know who we are, but that a fork would be something we can do in 7 days isn't really a security guarantee. Like, if the whole reasoning is we're going to keep the 7 days because the Ethereum has managed to do a fork previously in 6 days or in 5 days or something, a fork is going to be catastrophic for everyone in every possible way. Values going down, no one's going to trust the system. 7 days as a reason for 7 days doesn't make a lot of sense. I had another point, but I forgot.
Just on that and super quickly, I was talking with POTUS last week about, like, I would love for us to start actually, like, having real sort of drills on for Ethereum of, like, hey, if the sort of censorship attacks we're worried about were to occur, like, could we coordinate? Could we align? What would happen? That would be amazing to try to, like, actually simulate.
I also wanted to add that Fossil is an amazing step towards having better guarantees on all these fraud-proof transactions. Just wanted to second that voice.
Yeah, POTUS, go for it.
No, I'll ask you later in a
Okay. Anyone else want to jump in with anything, or we have about 9 minutes
Maybe I
left?
can just
Yeah.
add to this. I think instinctively to all of us, it makes a lot of sense that shortening the time, like the settlement time, would increase capital efficiency for solvers. But I haven't seen any good data for that. So one of the things I'm worried about is, without like sufficiently justifying this move with actual research, that we just kind of YOLO the time window to be shorter. And then if there starts a race between fraud-proof roll-ups to lower it more, then everyone else kind of has to follow in step for sort of business needs.
Nice. Okay, this I mean, other people should honestly talk to this as well, across included. But I'll just say that we have talked with both market makers as well as centralized exchanges, and everyone at the end of the day, if you are supporting ETH on an L2, you need to account for the fact that you need to withdraw within some time frame. And whether or not you are a market maker that is like actually rebalancing yourself, or you are a market maker that uses a centralized exchange for that rebalancing, what you are doing is you are not removing that problem, you are deferring that problem to the centralized exchange, because now the centralized exchange will offer rates, amounts of withdrawals per second or per day that they support for a market maker. And so this problem is fundamental. And what it ends up doing is it means that small chains do not get two things. They do not get efficient price discovery for ETH, and they too do not get across integrations. And so this is definitely, we can talk about it. We can compile a whole big doc, but it is factually accurate that it is a impact.
No, I fully agree. This is a disproportionate benefit for small chains, right? If you have a large chain, you have enough usage to actually incentivize market makers. This is definitely a benefit for small chains way more than ARB1 or OP mainnet or Base.
POTUS?
I think for me, it's the small chains that almost worries me more here because they're having an extra security council. It's almost acting like proof of authority. Sorry, I'm on mobile, so I couldn't figure out the hand raise button.
No worries. Thanks, Noah. POTUS, did you want to jump in?
I want to mention that regardless of what happens with this shortened period, I think we should get to a stage in which we can make some sort of assumptions about, for example, percentage of honest validators. And today, if we flip this and we neglect the 51% attack, then we're making that assumption. There's at least 51% of honest validators. And I would love to be in a situation in which the kind of assumptions we can make is there is at least 5% of honest validators, which is something that I would consider reasonable for rollup operators. And unfortunately, today, we cannot make that assumption because of the way of the PBS market on how it's set up. We cannot even make the assumption that validators are running vanilla software because someone else is building their blocks for them. I believe that after Glamsterdam, we have a chance of actually setting this up in such a way that we can make an honest assumption on 5% of validators are running vanilla software and will not allow censored transactions get in. And this is regardless of fossil. So I think I would try to make this discussion after we are in such a stage, instead of dismissing the 51% attack.
Yeah, Sahi?
Yeah, there is just one small point I wanted to comment about. We're talking about if we don't give like the users going to bridges, so they are anyway not getting security. And I just wanted to put it out that there is a huge difference between user while bridging an asset not getting security and user while staying on chain not getting security. And playing with when the chain finalizes is playing with the second, which is way worse than trusting a bridge for like 15 minutes with some funds.
So we have 4 minutes left. Maybe we can bring it back to the start. I don't know, Dano, if you have anything that you find useful to sort of bookend this conversation with, or anyone else have thoughts on potential next steps here. I think there's been a lot of really great discussion so far. Happy to help contribute to a summary that we can use for perhaps actually coming to some conclusions here. But
Yeah, so the only comment that I would leave is, like it's kind of easy, maybe, or maybe not so easy, but for sure easier to discuss like the benefits. I think it should be clearer what is the defender budget that we're comfortable with, because like if it is unrealistic, again, that the defender will be able to protect the chain because it needs too much budget, it needs to burn too much money, it means that proof systems that we use are completely useless. Like you can just remove the proof system if that's the case and just use the security council for everything, right? So like I think someone should run some number and see what is the expected budget the defender needs to have based on the TVS of a chain. And if you're comfortable with that.
yeah, go for it, Harry.
One just like quick note to throw in. I mean, and POTUS mentioned a couple times Amsterdam. Like it seems like, if we get alignment from everybody that there's something here that could be done pre-Glamsterdam, even better. But like also Glamsterdam's not that far away. It's relatively late stages. Like if we think that there's like some set of changes that is practical to be included along with that hard fork that would give us like a confident base to go off of, that seems like a very specific target that shouldn't be missed. So it's worth certainly having both conversations, but like also like let's not like miss Glamsterdam and have that pass and say like, oh wait, if we had just done X, then we would have been able to, you know, lower the period more confidently, assuming that there's general alignment in terms of that as a fork priority.
Because no one's saying anything, I'll just say that I'm really hopeful that at the end of this, we can figure out a way to give users the best experience possible while keeping them safe. And we can do that with practical solutions, which are implementable and reasonable. And that I think is something that we sometimes struggle with in the Ethereum ecosystem. We get a little bit, we start talking around about all these crazy ideas and stuff, and then we're like, oh, wait, where did the users go? So let's make sure that we focus on the users and we give them a great experience. And I think that's what matters. So let's lower the exit window. No, anyway.
Well said.
Just
Thank
kidding.
you, Carl. I think that's the best way to end the call. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We will share some summaries and continue the discussion. Talk to you guys soon.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye bye.
Thanks.